How'd you get into the boiler industry? What is your background?
All right, that's an interesting story. At least a lot of people tell me it's interesting. I'm born and raised in the Niagara Peninsula by immigrant Dutch parents, and my dad was from Holland, and he had worked in the greenhouse industry in the Netherlands. And so when he came to Canada, he wanted to get back involved in the greenhouse industry, but of course that takes a lot of resources that he, as a new immigrant, didn't have just yet. So he would work for people. While I was going to high school, he got me a job in a greenhouse. And so my first job in the boiler business was working in that greenhouse, was shoveling coal into the boiler hoppers and raking the clinkers out of the coal boiler. And so I would be working around the boilers with the owner himself, and got interested in them a little bit as we did that, and helped them with some repair work and fixing pumps and broken pipes and whatnot. And then my dad and my brother together both built greenhouses, and we had one boiler, and it had to run in the winter. It had to run all the time to keep the steam pressure up. And so my brother and I took turns sleeping in the boiler room. If the boiler quit, that would wake us up, and we would get up and fix the boiler. Then once it was running, we'd go back to bed to sleep. And so that's how I got sort of started into boilers themselves, was back at the age of 14, 15 years of age. And then finished high school, got a job working in Dominion Foundries and Steel, which is a blast furnace and coke ovens place. As an electrical apprentice, worked there to get an apprenticeship. But in the meantime, on my days off, I'd work around the greenhouse helping my dad and my brother fixing boilers, and they put more boilers in, and the used ones that we bought, and I fixed those used ones up. And then and one of them was an old, had been originally a coal-fired, but we bought it, and it had the single burner in the front of the stoker bit area. And every time it would quit, then we would have no steam again. So I said, why don't we buy two burners and put them crisscross fire them in the rake outdoors? And so that's what we did. We made up brackets. I made them up, welded them up, and mounted two burners with a key switch. So if one quit, you just turn the key switch, and the other one would start up. And we went along like that for a long time. And then finally had enough money. We bought some new boilers, and my brother and I installed them. And the guy came from Volcano. They were Volcano boilers we bought. When he came to start them up, he looked around the boiler room, and he said, so who installed these? I said, well, my brother and I did. And who did this over here? He was looking at the boiler with two burners on it. And I said, well, my brother and I did that, mostly me. And he says, holy macro. He says, you should come work for us at Volcano. And I said, well, I don't have any fuel licenses. By that time, I was a licensed electrician. He said, well, we need an electrician anyway to rewire a lot of old boilers anyway, so you should apply. He says, and I'll back you up on the application as a reference. So he did, and I applied, and Volcano hired me. And then I went to night school and got my oil license. And then after that, I went to night school and got my gas license. And I worked for Volcano for 8 or 10 years, and then started my own boiler and burner service company in the greenhouse business as primary customer base. And then that went along well. I had a partner in that, and then we did a lot of work for a big greenhouse manufacturing company and building company. And one day they came along and they said, we'd like to buy your business and make it part of our company. And I said, okay, put an offer on the table. So they did. So I sold the company to them, and I moved on to other career opportunities in the boiler business. Working first for Sterling Combustion, and then for Karam Controls, and then E.J. Walsh, and now with Morrison Mechanical. So I'm semi-independent with Morrison, and I work for two other companies as well on a part-time basis between the three of them. So keeps me fairly busy, busier than sometimes I even want to be at this time and this stage of my life. So, but I can't give it up. I love it too much, so I keep tinkering away at it.
What were the approximate dates, the years of shoveling coal and sleeping by a boiler in a greenhouse?
I was probably shoveling coal in the late 60s, 1968, 69, and sold my own company. I sold that in 2000. So that's 25 years ago now that I sold my company. And at that time, we had about 10 or 12 guys on the road doing service work and in the shop rebuilding boilers. We would buy used boilers from companies that were going out of business or something. And I had all my own equipment. We would remove them from the building with forklifts of our own that we owned, and we had our own dollies and block and tackles, etc. And then the only thing we didn't own was a flatbed truck or a Tilton boat, so we would hire that out to a guy that I knew, and he would do the transport portion of it, and we did the rest all ourselves. So when I sold it, we were selling probably 15 to 20 used boilers a year, in size from 50 horse up to 500 horsepowers, and we sold them like new with a 1-year warranty on everything, because we would recondition them to that point that we had that confidence in it, and we did well with it. So that was kind of a unique, and I've had the opportunity, and just in the last couple of years, I'm back working for what was originally my own company as a part-time guy. It was called Fuel Tech Combustion. I work for the owners now on a part-time basis, and I've worked on some of the boilers I sold 25 years or 28 years ago. So they're still going. So that's kind of fun.
That's gotta be a weird feeling walking into the mechanical room and knowing, oh man, I remember doing this 25 years ago when these were new, and I was always told, I used to work with somebody else, that when you start quoting replacements for boilers that you installed, it's probably time to start retiring.
Well, and that's right. And I'm officially semi-retired. I try not to work Mondays and Fridays anymore. With the tools, I'll do tech support. I just an hour before you called, I did tech support with one of our technicians at Morriston Mechanical. He's on a job, and he's a steam job, and he's having trouble with a high-low pressure control system for the burner, and troubleshooted him through on the electrical side of it to get that resolved, and it's now up and running. So that's always a good feeling too, when you can help a young fellow along and get him going over the phone. You know, I don't always have the drawing, but then I tell him, hey, you got a drawing? Yeah. Take a picture. Send me the picture by text. Then I can, here in my office, I've got a full-size printer, so I can print up full-size drawings, and I can go over the whole thing with him line by line. So he's looking at it exactly, and I have the exact same drawing, and that makes it troubleshooting a lot easier for him and me. And then I walk them through the drawing. My electrical background really comes in as a huge advantage with troubleshooting, right? That's where I think most young guys get hung up and this fella is the same case. Their electrical knowledge is not so strong enough, and they don't know how to read a ladder diagram.
Yes, electrical troubleshooting is probably the number one skill that I hear about, although somebody can understand electrical, but they are going to be 100% reliant on the drawing if they don't understand the sequence operations of a general boiler. Like right now, if I told you to draw out a wiring diagram of a simple atmospheric boiler, you could do that. And if boiler service technicians are built to always rely on a drawing and they don't actually understand the sequence operations, then when they don't have the drawing or it's an older system that's been changed, then they immediately just give up. Well, I don't have a drawing, so I don't know what's going on. Well, no, you can like fill in the gaps and have the ability to understand it, because every boiler, whether it's steam or hot water boiler, really works the same. They just change a little bit depending on the controls and how fancy they are. So
Absolutely.
So when you were learning boilers in your teenage years, you were firing coal, and then did you switch to fuel oil, or did you just go right to gas?
No, I first did fuel oil. First got my oil licenses and did a lot of oil equipment, and gas was also available for service work. So I did some gas under supervision of a gas fitter. And I had a guy, his name was John Lucas. He was my mentor, and he's the guy that suggested I get hired on at Volcano. And he said to me all the time, he says, Roy, he says, if you want to make more money, you got to go on nighttime service calls. So I said, okay, how do I go about that? He said, well, I'll help you with it. He says, first we got to talk to the boss and get you on the list. And I said, okay. So we did that, and I got on night calls. And then he said to me, you go to a call and you look it over. He says, and if you don't know what you're up to, he says, you just call me. Middle of the night, doesn't matter. There's my home phone number. Just call me at home and I'll walk you through the job. I said, okay. And he did that. And it was quite amazing. I would call him sometimes, and then he would say, okay, in the right-hand corner of the panel, you're going to see a terminal block, and there's a red, white, and a blue wire, and you got to do this and this with, oh, yeah, okay. And then I'd be doing that, and I'd get the boiler running. And I'd be watching it for an hour to make sure everything was good. And I'd turn around, and all of a sudden, here's John standing in the boiler room behind me, no matter where it was. He would drive out to make sure I was okay. So I picked up from that, and I've been doing that for young fellows for a number of years now, that I help them out that way. I tell them, you can call me anytime. I have a fella that I met through LinkedIn. Him and I have never met face to face, but we have talked. And just this weekend past, he was on a project, some rental boiler somewhere down in southern U.S., and they're Autoflame, and I'm an Autoflame specialist as well. And he called me already on Friday night, said, tomorrow morning, I got to start up 2 rental boilers with Autoflame. I haven't done it for a while. Can you just walk me through the process? So I did that Friday night. While I'm home with my wife, I'm typing to him and talking to her, and then typing to him, and she's getting a little annoyed, of course. But and then Saturday and Sunday mornings, a few questions came back from him, and I answered his questions. And I've been mentoring him along, remotely for 4 or 5 years now, and it's gone well, and we have a good rapport. We talk on the phone quite often, but we've never met face to face. But it's still fun to help somebody like that out, and make sure that they do what's right instead of taking too much time and doing what's wrong in the end anyway.
Have you always worked in Canada, or have you done any work in the U.S.?
I have done a ton of work in Canada, all the provinces, including Nunavut up in the north. I have worked in many, many of the states in the U.S. For Autoflame systems. I've worked in Cuba for Autoflame systems. I've been to England several times to the Autoflame and the Limpsfield factories. And when I had my own company, I was an agent for a burner company out of Holland, out of Zanting. Zanting is the name of the company. And so I've been to Holland to their plant on a number of occasions as well. And I made good friends with one of their chief engineers, electrical engineers. And I was just in Holland a couple of weeks back and looked him up and talked with him. We didn't get to meet face-to-face this trip, but we have done other times. I've been to his home and met with him, and he's been here, and he's been for dinner at our house with my wife and I. And so, yeah, the boiler business is a worldwide business, but it's a small company business, because you get to know people that you make relationships with, and they stick for life. And I think that's kind of neat too. So
yeah, sounds like it. So I know Canada has a lot of remote places. How many times have you flown on a little plane, single-engine prop plane, to go service a boiler?
I have done that on a number of occasions. I can't tell you how many exactly, but I have a number of mines in northern Canada, in Nunavut, that I have worked on in the last 5 or 6 years especially. And for me to fly to one of those mines, from leaving home to get to the mine site, it's almost a 2 days worth of travel just one way to get there, and then 2 days of travel to get back again. And so that's a unique situation to go on a service call. And then when you're there, you're in a mining camp, and because of the flights, they don't come in, they don't fly in and out every day. So if you're there, for sure you're probably going to be there a minimum of 8 days, because the flight doesn't come in for another 7 days after they dropped you off. So you might as well make the best of it and check everything in the boiler room you can check while you're there, and tear everything down and put it back together that you can do. And so that's what we do when we go up. So we price that a little bit differently. Basically we run it as a per diem cost rather than an hourly rate. And then when we're there, we do everything we can in their boiler room from start to finish to try and get everything in tip-top shape.
What does a mine use a boiler for? Is it a steam boiler?
Well, they will have both. They'll have steam and hot water. Primarily, we get involved with a company that's a U.S.-based company, that makes the explosive emulsion that they're using to blast the rock apart. So in making the emulsion and mixing various chemicals, including fuel oil, together to make that mixture, they have to apply heat to it because it's not very viscous when it's cold. So they have to warm it up to get the blending correctly. And that's where the boilers come in. So some of those boiler mixture or those chemical mixes are done with hot water boilers, and some of them are still done with steam systems. So it varies from mine to mine and from application to application. Yeah.
And is this mining for like oil? I know the oil sands are a big thing in Canada.
Yeah. So I've worked in Fort McMurray where the big oil sand projects are. I've worked up there as well, yes. The mines I'm referring to in this particular application are mostly for diamonds, iron ore, and other precious minerals, uranium, etc. So, and so it's deep well mining, etc. Now, and we don't get into the actual mine. Everything is done. These buildings, because they're making the explosive material, are actually remote from the actual mining camp, because if there's an explosion there, they don't want to lose the whole camp. So it's actually quite a ways off site, usually a couple of kilometers off site, where the boilers and everything are situated, and they're running only on diesel fuel up there. All their power comes from just generator sets, etc. So you have a lot of unique conditions because, of course, generators don't always give clean power and all the rest of it too. So there's lots of interesting things that happen when you're up there. Yeah.
What is the boiler regulation atmosphere look like in Canada? As far as like, I know most politicians are death to boilers, death to natural gas, electric, everything. What's that look like? I know there's, I only know a little bit about Canada. Actually, my mom was born in Canada, so I have family in Canada, but I am not I've been there a lot, but I have not kept up with the regulations. I know there's differences between the provinces.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you would know best. So,
well, the provinces, by and large, they all have adopted the same code, but they have what we call localized amendments because operating conditions in one part of the province or in one part of a province might vary because of certain climatic situations, etc. up there. So the codes will have variations adopted into them as amendments. At one time, I was licensed in Ontario, and I was licensed in Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, and Alberta, both all. I tried to get my one for British Columbia, and they have a rule there that at that time they wouldn't allow you to write and challenge an exam. You had to take a full apprenticeship starting from scratch. And as a journeyman, I wasn't going to do that. It cost too much money and time. So if I had projects in BC, there was another way around it, and that was I would hire a local guy, and I would pay him to sit on the stool in the corner while I did the work, and we worked under his license. He was the mechanic, and I was the helper, and we got around the rule that way. So there's always some ways to circumvent the authority, but the registration up here of technicians in Ontario in particular is pretty rigid, and the controls over boilers and burners. I just can't bring a boiler in from anywhere and fire it up and let it go. It has to be approved here for use here by our local government's approved inspection agency, the TSSA. And they're pretty onerous. They come out and they will not leave a screw unturned until they've tested everything possible to make sure that boiler is safe for the use it's intended to be used for here, and for the fuel system that it has on it. And so it's a lot of work. It could be on a small boiler, it could take you half a day to do an inspection with them, and on a larger boiler, if you have everything ready, and when you know what they're going to expect, you have it ready when they arrive. You can do it in a full day. But I've seen guys who didn't have things ready and weren't well prepared. It can take them a week to get it approved. So the testing is severe here. The licensing is registered pretty heavily as well. We have different classifications of licensing for oil and gas fitters from, let's call it from apprenticeship all the way up to a journeyman technician. And so, like in gas, I think there are 4 graduations, and in oil, I think there are 3 graduations. Um, but I myself carry gas and oil now, and I can fire any BTU input piece of equipment that there could be in the province. I'm legally allowed to fire it, and it doesn't have to be approved while I'm firing it. It only has to be approved once I decide to leave it running without my attendance. But if I'm on site for testing purposes, I can run anything. So that's helpful.
Is the levels, how do they separate the equipment? Is it by the input?
Yeah, mostly it's by input. So in the gas, they have a basic ticket that is 0 to 400,000 BTU. So that would be residential furnaces and water heaters and very light commercial equipment. And then you'll go from that to a next level, which would take you to being an apprentice under a G1. A G1 is an unlimited BTU input. And then you have to before you can challenge the exam on that, you have to have been signed off of having X number of hours available or actually worked in that trade under the supervision of a particular journeyman before they'll let you write an exam for the next level. I've signed off for a couple of guys over the years. And that sometimes comes back to bite you in the backside if they don't do well on their exam, because then the government comes to you and says, well, you trained this guy and he failed miserably. What did you do wrong? Right? So, but we will get into that discussion on another day, because not everybody retains information the same way, right? So they can physically be good at doing it, but it's not always that they're able to articulate that in the printed page. So that makes a difference too. And the same on the oil. You have to prove years of experience under a qualified person before they'll let you to write that final exam and become a journeyman. And I was working on a job last week with a young fella, and I posted a little bit about it on LinkedIn even. And he's very knowledgeable, knows a lot about burner control systems, but he's not real familiar yet with oil distribution and pumping and pressure and atomizing differences in different nozzle sprays, etc. So I've said to him too, I said, man, you need to take a course and get your oil ticket because you're good at it and you're going to be good at it. And there's a real shortage of licensed oil guys in Ontario. So I've encouraged him and I've encouraged others to take the thing. But the problem is getting a course together. Most of the colleges are not offering courses because they can't get enough people together in one group to make it profitable, right? So I've had a couple of people come and ask me recently if I would run a course, and I'm thinking about doing that. But then I want to have some discussion with the government before I run it to make sure that I teach them the material that the exam is going to be focused towards, right? So, yeah.
Is the exam multiple choice?
No, it's a variety of stuff between multiple choice to essay answers. Okay, to drawing, you have to draw out stuff like typical schematic of a basic burner control system. You have to draw out a gas train or an oil train. You have to be able to label parts on a fuel oil pump. Etc. So there's a whole variety of things that are on that exam. It's pretty intense when you do write it, but it's not to such a point that a guy, if he knows basically what he's doing, he should be able to pass that pretty well. And so we have those exams available through the college system, and guys can go there and challenge them. But you need to prove your years of experience first. Yeah.
Yeah, you can guess on a multiple choice, but when it says write, an essay or something like that, if you don't have any understanding of it, it's going to be very difficult. So who grades these exams?
Well, it's an inspection grouping from the typically from TSSA. They'll set the exam and they'll grade the exam. So they have a licensing department, TSSA, which stands for Technical Standards and Safety Authority here in Ontario. and they regulate the code and they regulate licensing, and they also regulate the pressure vessel side of it. So instead of AMBA or whatever we have TSSA pressure vessel department. So they make sure that the vessel is registered, that the drawings are registered, that the safety valves are yearly inspected, or if it's a hot water boiler, every couple of years that they're certified again, etc. That's all done by the TSSA people. So they run both fuel safety and pressure vessel safety.
Are
And
all boilers in Canada, to your knowledge, built to ASME?
yes, they use the AMSE as our basic requirement. And then again, because of some places in Canada, because of temperature issues and things like that, then they do have some amendments that they add to that, some criteria amendments. But by and large, we still use the AMSE code the same as you. We use NAFTA code. We use CSD1 for as a base guide for a lot of our regulation. But then we've condensed that or rewritten it into our own B149 or 139 for oil. 149 is for gas, 139 is for oil. So they will have amassed information out of all of those different documents into one local, what we'll call local code or a Canadian code. Mm-hmm.
Are there boiler operator licenses or laws for boilers over a certain size need 24/7 supervision?
Yeah, absolutely. And TSSA oversees that as well. Operating engineers, we call them. So they'll have credentials from a fourth class stationary or operating engineer up to a first class chief style. And it depends on the temperature and pressure that your system is operating at. And that doesn't matter if it's hot water or if it's steam. If you're hot water over 249-degree water and in excess of 30 psi, or if you're 250-degree water at 30 psi, you'll need a basic operator, fourth class, and moving up from there, depending the higher the temperature and the higher the pressure. And the same on steam, anything over 15 psi, okay, and greater than 50 horsepower. Well, actually 49.9 horsepower. If you're greater than that, you have to have some kind of a certification, or you have to have an exemption certificate that says they've inspected it and allow you to function one unit at that size for your manufacturing process. And if you need more horsepower, it can't be, in many cases, tied into the same header. It has to be a separate. So you could do a bunch of multiple 49.9 horsepower boilers on one property that are all separate systems. Yeah. So like last week, I was working in a plant that was probably producing in the area of 1 million pounds of steam an hour. So that would be a first class steam plant here. So it has a chief operator at first. It will have a first class floor operator and possibly two first class operators on the floor and probably two second-class operators on the floor. There's probably in this one about 6 or 8 boilers, so there's a lot of blowdown and testing and shedding of boilers on and off as the loads vary too. So there's a lot of work for operators to do. So, and they have one guy sitting in a control room all day with, 25 or 30 different monitor screens, and he's monitoring every boiler and everything, water level, de-aerators, condensate feeds, and you name it. So if I work there, then I have to work in concert with him to tell him what we're going to be doing. We're going to be firing this particular unit on oil or taking it off of oil, etc., and moving to the next one. So it's well laid out and it's well done in I think in Ontario. It's a little bit different in a couple of the other provinces about operation, but by and large, they do have a regulation about some sort of a criteria for the operator. Just the levels of where they start vary a bit from province to province. Yeah.
Is Canada pushing to get rid of fuel oil, or is just the nature of how Canada laid out, how everything's spaced out, is fuel oil still a pretty prominent fuel?
Good question. So I'm going to say both. there are regions in Canada where there is just no gas piping available yet. So oil is one of the best alternatives then. Propane would be the next for those people. And there's quite a few yet wood-fired plants around as well. They're becoming almost a little bit more prevalent in the last couple of years just because of the cost of fuel. But we have a regulation here that says in a hospital, especially in Ontario, a hospital must have a dual fuel option on every boiler. So the most practical solution then is natural gas as the main fuel and number 2 oil as the alternative fuel. That's the most practical. Now in some plants where they're going, newer hospital plants where they're going to condensing boilers for hot water, oil is not a good option for condensing boilers. So then they're going to propane tanks as their backup fuel. But they must have 2 fuels so that in the event of any kind of an infrastructure disaster and the natural gas is cut off for some reason, they're able to function those hospital plants still with an alternate fuel. So that makes oil still a good license to have because there's a lot of hospitals. Every major metropolitan community will have a hospital at least, and a lot of rural areas have hospitals, and they have to have 2 fuels. So there's a good opportunity for young fellows to have a specialized certificate in having a fuel oil license. And there are, last I spoke to TSSA, there are less than 200 licensed oil fitters in all of Ontario, but there are probably something like 5,000 licensed gas fitters. So that's a big discrepancy in numbers.
Are they concerned about that?
Yes, they're very concerned, actually. They even, for a while, were talking about if a guy who had a gas fitter 1 ticket was willing to sit down and just challenge the oil exam, they were talking about actually giving him an oil ticket even though he had no experience. But they've backed off of that now because they've realized that could lead to some liability disaster. So they've said, no, we won't do that yet. But they are concerned, and they're trying to come up with a program that would encourage young fellas to pick up the fuel oil side of it. But I run into a lot of guys and they say, I don't want to work on fuel oil. It's too stinky. It gets my hands dirty. My wife doesn't like it when I come home smelling like oil, so I don't want to do it. The fella I service called with this morning is sort of one of those guys. He doesn't really want to. He's been with me on a few oil calls where I said, I got to have another guy, so you got to come with me because he's a sharp fella. But he's not too keen on touching anything that's got oil going through it because he doesn't want to get his fingers dirty. And I say, well, just bring a box of latex gloves and wear the gloves. You'll be fine, right? But yeah, I grew up with it. They didn't, so it's different.
Yeah, there's a certain level of comfortability around it, especially when you have to take things apart because you can never drain all the oil out of pipings. Then oil starts getting everywhere. You got to have the rags to clean up the oil dry and everything. And it is a different way of thinking a little bit than working on gas boilers. But yes, if you use the gloves and you get good ones that don't rip and that don't dissolve under oil, I don't think it's as bad as most people say. I think there's a lot of people just don't know and they're scared of what they don't know. But once you get on the other side of the hump of the education, they're like, oh, like that's not that bad.
Exactly.
So, is a lot of oil pressure atomized, air atomized? Do you see any steam atomization?
Yeah. Well, what I was working on last week is steam atomized. They were Peabody burners, so they're steam atomized. We're firing. I'm going to have to guess here a little bit on gallons, but we were doing 9 or 10 gallons a minute, so you can figure out the math on that for per hour. But that's all steam atomized. And then in an emergency, if the plant had been down and had no steam back up, they have compressors so they can run air through the atomization lines to get them running and then switch back over to steam afterwards. But in most residential and what I'll call light commercial applications that have oil, hospitals that have oil, that's all mechanical atomized because they don't want to have the infrastructure of steam lines and air lines to every burner, of course. Most of the ones in the hospitals will be remote pump sets for the burner as well. They will not be integral pumps. Um, so that makes a lot of sense too, because that way you're not driving a pump or worried about driving a pump that's not actually delivering oil and turning it and spinning it dry and burning it out, and then you go to need it and it's no use to you anymore. So, but I would say the majority of what guys would get involved with will be mechanical atomized. Now, in the greenhouse business, there would be a lot of people have Cleaver Brooks boilers, and they typically would use on anything over 150 horsepower. They would use air atomized and have built-in air compressors on the Cleaver Brooks boilers. So guys would need to know about air atomizing. And if they can do air atomizing, they can do steam atomizing. The principle is the same. The nozzles can be the same. It's just a matter of having. If you're doing steam atomizing, typically you want to have some crossover metering, and you want to have some insulation on the lines going to the steam regulator and nozzle, because you could touch it and burn your hand in a heartbeat. Okay.
What is the education outlook? Is it kind of like the same as the U.S. as high schools, or I don't know if you call it high schools, but in the U.S., high schools push college, and then college pushes white collar jobs? Is that kind of still how Canada is, or does that really vary by region,
Yeah.
depending on how populated it is?
A good question too, Eric. Because I think at one time when I went to high school, as an example, we had high schools that specialized in technological training. So when I was in high school, I took electrical systems. I took woodworking and drafting and automotive repair and etc. So you had a feel for, as a young fella, some of those trade options. And a lot of guys took those courses, and a lot of guys went into the trades because of that. But high schools have gotten a little bit away from that because of the risk of somebody getting hurt in the classroom. So they've gotten away from it a little bit. Colleges are picking up on it somewhat and teaching the trade option courses. But by and large, it's still like so many people around North America, period, say, well, go get a good education and you'll get a really good office job. Well, a really good office job is fabulous, but we're going to run out of workers who actually make the stuff go if we don't train young fellows into doing technological type work, whether it's carpentry work or whether it's electrical or it's steam fitting and pipe fitting. Somebody's got to build the buildings that we all live in and the housing that we live in, etc. So we need guys who are technical and who are good at technical, who can get it done quickly and not cost an arm and a leg to get it done because they didn't know what they were doing. They made too many mistakes.
And if somebody would want to get their gas fitter's license and they're 18 or 20 or young and they have no idea what's going on and they're like, I want to go do that, what would be the process to get that? Do they have to join a union, or do they just work for any company that has people with that license?
Okay, and you have both options here, because we have a lot of service companies that are unionized, and we have a lot of service companies that are not unionized. So I think you have an option there that way to pick a company that's either union or not. The non-union companies have certain advantages over the unionized shops, and vice versa, because unionized shops, typically the union halls have training classes and training instructors and programs behind them that the young fellas can sign up for to do during slower periods in that particular field as well. So that's always a good option for them. So I think it depends on where you are located, because in the big metropolitan areas, the unions have representation in a strong way, so they also have union halls where they do a lot of training. If you're out in the rural area, you don't have a close proximity to a union hall. It might be better for you to join a non-union shop and then travel to one of the community colleges where you can take your in-class training and academic training, and then come back to the job site for your hands-on training. And so it's available both ways, and I think both of them have fabulous advantages available to them. And I wouldn't say there's one that's better than the other. I think it's just a matter of your geographical region where you live, which one you would probably opt into.
So, in order to get the license, somebody has to take so many hours or so many classes of classroom training and then have so many hours of on the job training under somebody that's under already licensed.
Yes, correct. That's the standard route here. They will do a mixture of academic and hands-on or co-op style training. Yep.
So why'd you choose to get your electrical license?
Well, when I was in high school, I actually wanted to be an automotive mechanic, and my brother at the time, and I'm now thankful he did that. He's a little older, so he's a little wiser. He said to me, "Man," he says, "I wouldn't be an automotive mechanic for all the money in the world." And I said, "Why not?" He says, "That winter you're under that hoist, and the car's up on top of you, dripping salt water all over your nose and face." He said, "Why didn't you do something like electrical?" And I was taking electrical in high school, and I really enjoyed that as well. I thought about it for a while, and I thought, you know what, maybe my brother has a good point here. So I said, okay, I'm going to venture into electrical. And so when I graduated, I applied to a couple of big plants, steel mills and stuff, and they were looking for apprentices, and I got into apprenticeship for electrical. I did 5 years apprenticeship here, and then paid them back with 5 years as a journeyman, and then I decided to leave and go into the full time into the boiler section of industry. So, but that's where I got my start. Was right out of high school. My electrical apprenticeship was the first job I took on, and so I'm still carried my electrical license in construction and in maintenance, and I have my gas fitters ticket. I have my oil fitters ticket, and I have my master's in wet heat which is so for repair and installation of boilers. You need you don't have to have, but it's good to have a master's certificate. So I wrote that exam.
What did your brother end up getting into?
My brother was a metallurgical technician for Stelco, which is the steel company of Canada at that time. Since they've closed their doors, but he was a metallurgical guy. Then he and my dad together, they made or built greenhouses, and he was growing and working in the factory. My dad was working in the factory, and they would, in their off hours, they would operate the greenhouse. And then as they grew, then first my dad retired from the factory and worked full time in the greenhouse. Then my brother resigned from his job in the factory and worked full time in the greenhouse. And I would just help them out as I was able, doing their boiler and electrical wiring stuff. So it was a family affair for quite a few years. So my brother stayed in the greenhouse business basically the rest of his life too. He's now fully retired.
So would you say your upbringing, your childhood, teen years is what influenced you to go into the blue collar trades route to get the electrical and then into the boiler? Would you say your greatest influence? I'm trying to explore how people got into the trades, and it seems like it, but I didn't know if you ever had your heart on something else and then kind of loop back around.
Well, actually, I did, and I'll get into that in a moment. But I'm going to say that I've always had an aptitude for and an interest in mechanical and electrical stuff. I've always had that since a young fella. I had Lego blocks when I was a kid, and the biggest important sets for me in those were the ones that had electrical lights and switches to make things work and go, and I loved playing with that. So that was an impact for sure. And I think my family's involvement in a family business gave me an opportunity to do it, that I could get my hands deep into it and find out that, hey, this is something I enjoy doing, so why not do it and make a career out of it. But I also had an interest in policing. And so, not right away, but later on in life, some 35 years ago, I got involved in policing as well as a part-time auxiliary police officer here in Ontario area with the Halton Regional Police, and I worked 30 years with them as a part-time police officer. I became a sergeant. I oversaw 21 other auxiliary officers for a number of years until I retired from that in 2022. So, so I ran two careers concurrently, both as a burner technician on call and as a policeman on call. And sometimes I would get called in when there was a major disaster somewhere. We had a huge train wreck here in the community where I live one Sunday afternoon, and we got called in to help coordinate keeping camera people out of the train wreck till the investigation could be done, until all of the rescue work could be carried out, etc. So, as an example, that was just one of those type of circumstances. So it was kind of interesting, and I really enjoyed that as well. But still, my heart and my soul were in the boiler business.
What intrinsic values do you think makes somebody a good service technician, good boilers, or somebody that works in the trades well? I've been thinking about this a lot. Because a lot of people, training, but with athletes, you can, play high school, you can play college, but in order to play at the pro level, you just have to be born with a certain level of athletic ability. And I'm trying to, it's hard to, because most people are younger and you can't always see somebody's display of knowledge or abilities if they've never really applied themselves. So what do you think, if you were looking at somebody who is 16 to 20 years old, what qualities would they have that would then make them successful to be a boiler service technician?
Great question. Okay, so I look at, and I having had my own company where I hired and fired my employees, of course, one of the first things I looked at was their determination. Are they determined? If I had a guy knock at my door today and say, here's my application, I'm looking for a job, and I took it and I said to him, okay, well, I'll read it and I'll call you. And I never heard from him again. I go, he's not the guy for me, because he wasn't determined enough to come back and knock on my door a second, third, or fourth time. If the guy came back every day for a week and knocked on my door saying, did you read my application? I knew he had something in there that was special, because he was really going to dig into it. And a service technician has to be someone who's going to really dig into a problem till it churns his gut into the inside out if he can't find the fix for it. And so that was one thing that I always looked for in a young fellow, was determination. Next would be aptitude. I would sit them down and just have a conversation with them about normal stuff in life. Do you have a car? Yes. Do you do your own tire changes? Do you own your own oil changes? Or stuff like that. If your muffler fell off, would you change it yourself, or would you take it to a body shop or a car mechanic shop? Things like that, and find out what level of ability that young fella had, and does he have a mechanical aptitude? Does he know how things are put together? If his car doesn't start, does he know how to troubleshoot the basic part of his car? Because most 16-year-old boys love cars. So if they love them enough, they're going to know how to make them fixed to a certain extent. So I would quiz them on that kind of stuff. And still today, I look at it when I'm talking to new technicians who I meet on a job for the first time. I have a conversation before we actually start the job. And I'm just seeking to figure out what is their aptitude in the electrical mechanical side of things in life. And are they doing this because it just pays the wages for the bread, or are they doing this because they really are keenly interested? And because I like to have technicians working for me and around me who are keenly interested. We have a young apprentice at Morriston Mechanical, and I love taking him on jobs. And sometimes when I go up to Nunavik and I need a guy, I always say to the owners, I say, I want that apprentice and only that apprentice to go with me, or I'm not going, because he is one of these young fellows who he has a feel for it. He thinks about it. He looks at something and he can figure out how it goes together and how it comes apart. And if I'm on a ladder and I need a wrench and I turn around, he's standing there holding up the right wrench to me already before I've ever asked for it. Well, there's somebody who has an aptitude for it and an interest in it. So those are keen things to have. And the
Where how does well, I don't want to cut you off, but where's that taught that
it's not taught. That's inbred. That's inbred. They are born with that or they don't have it at all. I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. And
yeah,
so I
the
think that I just would add, I think one last step to all technicians is I look at the cleanliness of their vehicle they're driving when they come to the interview. And if that car is immaculately clean, he's going to keep a service truck clean. He's going to look after his tools and equipment. If that car is a mess, your service truck is going to be a mess in a month, and he's going to lose tools right, left, and center. Because I think it all goes with a good mechanic is someone who takes care of his own equipment. If he takes care of his own equipment, he'll take care of somebody else's equipment.
yeah, you're essentially your service vehicle is your own. It's your office, but it's really your own company in the sense that when you're working out of it, it's your resource hub. It's your ability to show to the customer who you are. It reflects on the larger company. But if you don't take care of your own little space, you become inefficient. You can't find stuff. You lose parts, tools, and everything. And yeah, that does reflect on the person. I've heard that before of people. I mean, I can't stand people who have cars with trash and random sweatshirts. You know, if you have to get in the car and they're like, hold on, let me move all this stuff off the front seat, and there's stuff all over the floorboard stuff. I'm like, what are you doing driving this thing around? What also goes through my mind, have you ever been in a rollover? You know, all this stuff is going to be like coming at you.
Exactly. Exactly, Eric. Good point.
So yeah, I guess all the companies will be wondering, how do you duplicate a person like that, and how do you find them? How did that person get into the trades or into the how did they? I don't know what they're on, their gas license or whatever. Did they just start? What is their age? Do you know how they got in?
Yeah, it's a great question. This young fella got in that I'm referring to. His father is mechanically inclined and recommended him, the young fellow, when he got out of high school, to the company and said, "Listen, give my son a try for a summer, just for the summer job. Try him out and see if he's any good at mechanical stuff. So he'll know whether or not he wants to go into it, and if he's good at it, you might want to keep him, you might not. No questions asked if you turn him away and say, no, we don't want him." And the owners tried him out for a 2-month summer job, and he was the best thing since sliced bread. So they kept him on, and he is truly the best thing. He's one of the best apprentices I've run into for a long time. And it's a joy to work with somebody like that, right? And that makes all the work you got to do a lot simpler when both of you have your mind set into a good repair and an efficient repair and troubleshooting mechanism. So, yeah. But I think it's hard to determine that as a corporate, especially in the bigger corporate situations, because a lot of companies now, they aren't, the guy hiring, the service manager doesn't do the hiring anymore. Some administrator in the HR department does the hiring based on credentials only. They don't go out and look at their car. They don't talk to them about mechanical. They just read down the list and do they have the boxes checked off that were given to them by somebody. And if they does it, they hire them, and then you're stuck with this person for a while, especially under the laws of the land here in Canada. You can't just fire somebody because you don't like his work style. You have to have a solid grounds, and that's a good thing too, that they've done something inappropriate before you can fire them. So I want to know before I hire them that they have some kind of an ability. So I would throw at least a verbal test at them, and if really had to get down to nitty-gritties, I'd actually just write up a real basic written test and ask them to fill that in. I recently did a hiring, and I wrote a series of questions, and I asked all the attendants who were invited for interview exactly the same questions, and I wrote down exactly their answers. And then at the end, it was very interesting to see the answers and to see who was qualified and who was not qualified in the discussion, because there were technical questions. What would you do if a boiler didn't start and it was of this kind of boiler or that kind of boiler, right? And you could feel their approach to it. I wasn't looking for an apprentice, and it was for a fully qualified individual, but so they should know everything about it at that point. And so that's how I did it, and it worked out well for me.
Do you, assuming somebody has all the same licenses, how much correlation do you think there is between years of experience and actual knowledge?
Great question. I think it really varies based on the person's personality, because I have guys that I know who've been in the business 30 years, and I have also got apprentices who probably physically and mentally are better off than those guys who've been in the business 30 years, because they've just gone through the job as a job. They work their 9 to 5, and that's all they want to have. They don't think about it after they leave. If they have a problem and it's time to go home at 4:30, they shut the tools off and they shut their brain off and they walk away. Whereas a good guy, I think a good technician, and I'll say that I consider myself to be at least a reasonably good technician. That job doesn't stop until it's fixed in my brain. It's running through my brain day and night until I've got the solution to the reason why it's failing. Much to my wife's chagrin, sometimes she'll see me sitting at a table with my computer and my notebook, and I'm studying stuff at 9:00 at night. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, that job that I was on today." "Yeah, but you're home now." I said, "Yeah, but that job has to get fixed, and I got to find a way to fix it. I got to know what it is that's causing this problem." So I keep going at it, and I think it's paid off for me in dividends over the years. It's why I'm at retirement age, I'm still working, is because there's companies that see the value in some of the experiences I've got, and they call me and they say, "Hey, can you come and help me out with this job, or can you help us with that job? Can you do this job for us?" etc. I don't want to do jobs every day, all week long. No, I don't. I got to be frank with that. But I do a lot. I do a love of the work, and I do like to get involved, especially on jobs that have been problematic for somebody. I like to get in there and see if I can find a solution and fix it. And they 6 weeks later call them up and say, "Well, has that happened again?" "No, it's not happened." "Okay, now I feel good." If they say it's happened again, I say, "I'm going to come back and have a look, and I'm not even going to charge you this time. I'm coming back for free because I want to fix it." So
How do you define the line between life balance and caring? Because a lot of people, when you talk to them, especially if they are even in the trades, they'll say, "Well, they're not paying me to think about my job after 4:30, so why would I do that?"
yeah, no, that's real. That's a real situation in life. You are correct. A lot of guys think that way, and I think there's you have to look at that from a life balance, working and play balance for sure. You have to take time off. You have to enjoy with your family and spend time with your family, etc. Because really, that's what life is all about, is your family, and you have to make a good relationship with them. But I think, on the other hand of it, and then my wife, I think, will probably back me up on that if I asked her to come into the room and answer the question. We've been married 50 years, and she could say that because I've worked hard at the job, I've been paid well by the job, and we've been able to go and do trips and go to places that many friends of ours couldn't afford to go to. So I think when you apply yourself adequately to the job, and make sure that the job is done when you leave the job, the owners and operators of the corporations you work for are going to recognize that you are a unique individual, and you're going to end up making more money. You're going to be able to negotiate. They aren't going to offer it to you, but you'll be able to sit down and negotiate for that now, because you can say to them, "Well," and you keep a record, and you say, "This job, this job, this job, and that job, I fixed them up where you had 20 other guys on it and you couldn't get it going." example and point is the service call I had 2 hours ago, where one of our technicians was on a job, and he said to me right away, he says, yeah, he says, I got this job I've been asked to come and look at. He says, and by the way, the ABC company was in here yesterday trying to fix it, and they couldn't fix it. Well, that gives me right away the incentive to say to him, you and I are going to fix it right now, today. And within an hour, him and I had it fixed and resolved and found a wiring mistake that somebody had made. But that ability, whether it's mine or his or somebody else's, that ability eventually becomes a negotiating tool to be able to ask for better wages. Those better wages afford you to do more things with your family on your off hours and to take trips. And my wife and I just in September, October, we spent 4.5 weeks in Europe, touring Europe and visiting relatives because we're both from Dutch background in Holland and whatnot, and had a whale of a time. And then 2 weeks ago, I was on a job in Bermuda, in the hospital in Bermuda. I did work down in Bermuda. And my wife, I took her along on that trip so she could enjoy the sights and sounds of Bermuda while I was working. But we can do all of that stuff because the job pays me well enough to afford it. Right. And that's how we find a blend between life and work mix, is being able to negotiate a better wage than the average guy will get. I don't get union wages when I go out. I won't even look at the job for union wages. I go out for above union wages, so to speak, right? So I think you have to also accept the fact that some jobs are going to take you 24 hours. But then in my case, and I've done this my whole career, then I've said to the boss, okay, I work 24 hours on the job. Now I'm taking 48 hours or 36 hours or 72 hours off to replenish my strength and my brain power, and then we'll get back and we'll do the next problem job. And they respect that because they know you put your work in while you were there.
So you would agree that to make a good service technician, that the person has to have some level of intrinsic interest in the work that they are doing.
Absolutely. And I don't care whether that's as a boiler technician or it's an automotive mechanic or it's a doctor, okay, or a painter. The people who love their work, they do a way better job at it. And it shows in the end results when the job is all said and done. So I think it's important for young people, if they're going to pick the boiler career, boilers and burners, and it's a fabulous career. Huh? I've toured half of the world because of my work in the boiler business. And I think that career is something that you can enjoy doing, and you can get other enjoyment out of it because it's going to take you to places that you would never go. Who gets to walk through an automotive manufacturing facility where they're making cars from Toyota or something like that? Who gets to walk through them normally? Nobody. But if you're a boiler technician, you walk into them. Who gets to walk into a huge bakery where they make thousands and thousands of pastries a day, and they've got lots of boilers and burners in the process, cooking tunnels and baking tunnels, and work on those burners? A burner technician gets to go there. Nobody else does. I get to work in atomic plants and nuclear plants and uranium factories where they made the fuel cells for boilers in nuclear plants. You know, you name it. It's been so interesting to work in all these different places and see these different processes. So it's just, for me, it's just so much fun. And I try to let young fellows know that when I work with them about the opportunities that I've had, and they could have them if they apply their skill set to the job.
Yeah, I am of firm belief that if the person doesn't have that intrinsic interest, the company should just give up and move on to somebody else. Because being a technician or any kind of thing that working on boilers, it requires such a level of knowledge that if you are trying to train somebody who is not actually receptive of the training, I don't think there's any ability, outside force, that can force a company, any amount of pay even, that can teach somebody to care if they don't already care, as far as like to do a good job, that their work is done correctly, to take the time to be a problem solver and not just, oh, they told me to show up at 8. I show up at 8. I leave at 4:30. I close off my mind and I don't think about it till 8. And if there's a problem, I call my supervisor and tell him to figure it out. Yeah.
No, you're right. It's a personality trait, really, to have the right skill set. And I think, but I've found over the years, I see a guy walking towards me on the job floor, and I hate to be stereotyping, but I can just about peg you from 25 feet away by your appearance and your type of walking mannerism. If a guy is strutting nice and strong and happy, he's going to be a good technician. He's slouching and he's dragging his feet and he's kind of, oh man, I don't want to be here. You know that person right away, and I don't want him on my team. I also do a lot of volunteer work, and over the years, you sit around a boardroom table, and they talk about the right people on the bus, and we have to have the right people in the boiler room bus as well, because if you have someone who has a bad attitude, he can be more hazard to you than a boiler that explodes is.
Yes. So I think this is interesting, since you kind of had 2 careers. What makes a good police officer?
A caring personality, number one. I'm gonna say you got to like other people. You got to like to help people, and you've got to want to help people. So, a caring personality is going to be that, and an inquisitive mind, because you have to do a lot of investigative work, which is a lot like troubleshooting. So, you're troubleshooting a different item. It's people's lives now, or circumstances, but you're going to do investigative work, and that's what troubleshooting is all about. So those 2 sides of it, they kind of line up together. And so I think that a good policeman is someone who cares and who's a good troubleshooter. And I know many good police officers. I still have many good friends at the police department who are that way. But I also know a lot of people at the police department who are not gifted with that skill set, and they are, in my opinion, going through the job motions the way we have some technicians going through the job motions. They get the job done from A to Z at the end of the day, yes. But is it done as well, and is it done as completely? I would say no, it's not. Okay? So I think that, and that applies not just in boilers, policing, it applies in all job levels, that if you have an interest, you do better. If you have a certain personality skill, that also does better for you and for that project or that career choice.
I think the ability to care, that's huge. As far as being a police officer as well, but being a technician and understanding that if you're working at a large facility and you're called, one, you're representing the company and like your work is your signature, but the person that called you, let's just say like the supervisor, the maintenance manager, they care about getting the equipment fixed because they care about their job. And it's this chain. So if the technician comes in and is just like, whatever, they don't care to fix their equipment, and just writes the job off, doesn't fix it correctly, and leaves, now the maintenance manager looks bad to their supervisors when the boilers aren't running, and it's this whole chain of reaction. And I've always been of the belief that you have to care about the customer and see things how they are kind of seeing things, even if they are wrong. Like a lot of people will have a one-sided mindset, but it's having the ability to, okay, why am I being called out for this problem? Why is this important to them? Why do they not want to pay for a new burner? If I am saying, well, you just need a new burner. Well, we don't have the money for that. So like, what are the other options? Like you have to care about the customer situation and how you treat or go about the service call. If it's a church that doesn't have tons of money, hey, we would normally replace this, but we have a gently used one at our shop or something that we can come put it in. It'll be fine. Everything's tested. We won't sell you a new one. We'll try to save some money here. versus like a manufacturing facility where you just go, oh, we'll replace everything. It'll be 10 grand. They're like, oh, that's it? 10 grand? All right. Yep. Here you go. And it's having that level of ability of caring of what is important to your customer and having, I guess, we could talk about this. How big is personal skills and communication for being a technician?
Great question, because it is paramount. I just this morning, I have a project in Ottawa that I've been working with a contractor and the manufacturer's rep on, and there's a problem on that particular application with, in my opinion anyway, excessive draft on the stack. So we're having issues with the burner because of excessive draft. Okay, so I had a meeting with the contractor and the manufacturer's rep and said, this is what I think is wrong. And they said, well, can you write us a report so we can take it to the client and to their engineering company? I said, yeah, absolutely, because you need to be able to articulate to the people what's wrong and show them what's wrong with reports and show them what's wrong in a technical sense, but also in a practical sense. Say, listen, here, this is what I think is happening. Here are, I listed 6 optional solutions how to correct their draft problems. From the most, one of them is of course very expensive with full draft control, but there are also more what I'll call entry level draft control methods. So give them a bunch of options and write it all out, articulate it to them in words and verses that they can understand, not just with technical garbage, but with layman's vernacular so that they can actually follow it along, because they're not used to dealing with these type of scenarios and problems and dilemmas. So you have to be able to explain it to them in a way that they fully understand and comprehend it. And once they get the basic understanding, now you can start talking more technical and more detailed with them, I think. And I think a guy who can do that will excel. The same as in policing. When I took all my police training, one of the biggest lessons they teach you is being able to articulate why you took the course of action you took at any particular situation, whether it's for using force with someone in an arrest, or why you made an arrest, or why you made a traffic stop. You need to be able to articulate that to the judge when it goes to court. Well, the same happens in boiler work. You got to be able to articulate it to the customer who's paying the bill. Why does he need to pay an extra $10 instead of already the $50 you were quoted? So
when you do the work that is, or somebody else couldn't fix it, how often do you see a problem of where somebody just kind of skipped over the basics versus a problem where you're like, wow, that was really interesting. You really would have had a very high level of knowledge in order to solve that.
Right. So the call that I helped a young fellow with 2 hours ago was a wiring mistake. It was a new burner installed just a week ago by another firm, by a third company, so they couldn't get it to work. They called a second party in that was there yesterday. They couldn't get it to work. They called our company in this morning, and we got it to work within 2.5, 3 hours of being on site. We found a wiring mistake that was made by the first installation company. And we do a lot of startups, what I call third-party startups. So someone else sold it, someone else installed it, and then we come along and commission it. Well, the biggest part of commissioning is not getting the fuel-air ratio set up, but it's checking all the wiring in the installation, every pipe. And a technician has to know electrical work. He has to know piping work. He has to know pressure vessel work. He has to know pumping systems. He has to know venting systems. Okay, all of that he has to know. And here in Ontario, the guy who installs it is not responsible for the mistakes. It's the guy who starts it up that's responsible for the mistakes of installation. So it's our job as a startup or commissioning technician to know exactly what is right or wrong with the system before you ever go. And if it doesn't meet the specs or the criteria, you better not put it into business and put it into service. You could test it, but don't leave it running. Lock it out when you're done and walk away till it's fixed. And so we find a lot of mistakes, tons of wiring mistakes in particular, because often installation companies will hire an electrician to do the wiring, but today he's wiring a garage door, tomorrow he's wiring a boiler, the day after he's putting lights in a house. So it's not his expertise to know about control circuit stuff on a boiler. And that's all very specialized wiring. And if you don't wire the chain of safety limits in the proper series link, you know, things can go amiss in a hurry. So it's important to know and to understand what it is you're trying to wire up. So we find a lot of wiring mistakes, number one. Number two, we find a lot of physical, mechanical mistakes with the piping and application of installation. It's just horrendous because a lot of that work is done on bid spec, and the cheapest bid gets the job, right? You and I have seen all kinds of pictures on LinkedIn and other places where you see a piece of equipment piped in, and just looking at the picture, you and I stand there and laugh at it, and we go like, who in their right mind tried to do this? But yet there's guys out there in their right mind, it's okay. So, it means that we have different levels of technical ability. Those who install and those who commission are really two different levels of people. And I think there should actually be a pay change as well from an installation license to a commissioning license. I would say that I dictate that pay change myself today, but a lot of companies don't recognize the difference. They say, well, he's licensed, so he's got a G1. He can do the piping. Well, then if he's that good at it, why don't you have him start it up? Oh, well, no, I wouldn't ask him to do that. Well, then that means he's not quite as good as you think he is, or you would like him to be, right?
There's a very high level of knowledge needed to walk into a boiler room, probably for the first time, and maybe somebody's staring at you, maybe a couple contractors are staring at you, and they're like, all right, we're all ready. And you're like, I guess I'll ask you what your process is, but you're going over all the equipment. And when I was doing startups, I was essentially trying to rule out, is there anything major that prevents startup or like the process of startup today? Like, is the boiler installed upside down or like something crazy? Or like, do we actually have gas pressure? Do we have power? Is the power ran correctly? Are there actually wires going to the burner? Are all the, depending on the size of the boiler you get, a lot of contractors will just plot the boiler down and they won't do all the field wiring because the boiler manufacturer doesn't do the field wiring because different sizes, maybe the burner ship separate, all this stuff. And they're like, well, that wasn't on our prints. So you see all these wires just hanging off the side of the boiler. And you're like, oh, well, wait, we are far from it startup. So like, what is your process in, do you just look over everything? Do you separate it? Do you have your own checklist? How would you recommend somebody absorb all that information and try to understand, is this correct? Is this not correct? And then proceed in the startup.
Yeah, that's also a good question, Eric. And I run into that not every day anymore, but every week when I go to do a new startup or a restart of a piece of equipment that's been out of service for a period of time. But you made a mention of what we call near boiler wiring. So that's the assembly of the boiler. It was shipped in 4 components, and then it's mechanically bolted together by a contractor, but nobody looks after the nuts and bolts of wiring up those pieces. So that near boiler wiring, that can take a couple of days for a guy to do if it's not been done. So, but I walk into a boiler room, they say, well, we're all ready. And I say, that's fabulous. I'm glad to hear that. Listen, here's $25. All of you go for a cup of coffee while I walk around the boiler room and have a look at it with nobody bothering me. And I buy them a coffee, get them out of my hair, and I walk around with my own little mental checklist. And I start with fuel supply, and then I look at wiring supplies, and I look at wiring connections, and then I look at, is the boiler bolted to the floor or not? Is the piping firm? Is the venting in place? Is the venting the right venting for the type of appliance, right? I've been into places where I go to start a power burner and it's got B-vent on it. Well, it's not acceptable in Canada to use B-vent on a power burner. It's only, acceptable for an atmospheric burner. So stuff like that. So I just walk around and I look at it. And in the old days, you walked around with a notepad and you made notes of it all. Today, you take your phone and you walk around with that and you just take a picture of everything that's wrong. And I do it. And then when they come back from the coffee, then I say, okay, guys, you want me to start it up, but let's look at these pictures I've got here that I just took. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. We're not going anywhere today. You're going to have to fix it. And they all get their nose out of joint, of course. And I understand they thought they were done, and somebody comes along and says, "Hold up, but you're not done. You still have another day's work or week's work, whatever." They get their nose out of joint. So, but that's the way it is. It's too bad. It's either they're going to get the job to do it and do it correctly, or somebody's going to pay me to do it, and they're going to pay me way more money because I demand more money because of my years of and expertise. So it's not prudent for them to have me be paid to do that work. They're going to be better off to pay themselves to do it. And we get them to fix it. And sometimes I say, listen, I'm here. I'm going to stay on the job for a day or two with you and coach you through a lot of this stuff so that you can get it done quickly and efficiently. And I'll make sure that you're connecting it correctly so that we save time when we finally do start to put power to things and put fuel through pipes and put water through the boiler and put steam out into the header, etc. And I think that they find when you approach it that way, where you say, listen, I'm willing to stay and coach you a little bit. Yeah, I'm going to bill somebody for that hours, but that coaching might actually be well worth its weight in gold to get the project moving along. And so I do that, and I take that approach to do that. Sometimes you run into a pretty hard block wall and they say, there's no way. So then I say, okay, well, that's fine. You don't want to do the repairs. That's fine. We'll leave the repairs, so leave it the way it is. And I just start packing up my own tools and I start, heading back to my vehicle. They go, where are you going? I said, well, I can't start it not done. So there's nothing I can do here. I'm a startup technician today. I'm not an installer. That's your job. So I don't want to take your job, especially if you're a unionized guy. Next thing I know, the union will be here chomping on me because I'm taking your job away. So let's not go there. You get it done, and like I said, I'll help you. So when they're cooperative, it goes well. When they're not cooperative, it always goes in the end the right way, but it takes longer to get that achieved. But I think by and large, when you could show someone and say, hey, look at this flange. It should have 8 bolts in it, but it's only got 4 bolts in it. I can't put 250 pounds of steam pressure on a flange that's only got 4 bolts in it. It's not good for my safety, number one. It's not good for the plant safety, and it's certainly not good for your safety because I'm going to demand you stay here until we've done pressure testing on all the piping. And if the only way I can pressure test the steam piping is with steam pressure, you're going to stand here and watch it. So if it blows, you're going to be here when it blows, buddy.
The piping manufacturers didn't say, hey, you know what? We're just going to drill an extra 4 holes in these flanges just because we feel like it.
No, exactly. Exactly. They did not. Those are there for a purpose and a reason.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's always important. So how'd you get it hooked up with Autoflame? Why Autoflame?
Okay, that's an interesting. When I had my own company, I was importing burners from Holland, from Xanting. And in Autoflame's very first couple of years, because they're in UK and the burner company was in the Netherlands, they got connected very quickly together, and they started putting Autoflame on their brand new Xanting burners. And so I had to learn in a heartbeat how to get these things up and running. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go and get a course from them on it. And I've been to Autoflame several times, right to their old plant and now to their new plants. Really, really enjoyed working with parallel positioning equipment, which in the original go Autoflame was only parallel positioning temperature or pressure controllers. They had no flame safety function whatsoever. It was interconnected with your own Honeywell, your own FireEye, your own Eclipse, whatever it is, flame safeguard you had, it was incorporated into that one. And that was in what they called the Mark 1 edition of the Autoflame. Today they're out to Mark 9. But it's fairly new. The most common currently in the field is Mini 8s and Mini and Maxi 8s, as I call them, the full screen. And Yeah, parallel positioning today with the integrated flame safeguard, I love working with it. It's fabulous equipment. And not only is Autoflame's fabulous, I think it may be, in my opinion, and I'm biased maybe, it's one of the best. Um, but there are a number of other good systems out there too, and I have worked on all of them. A number of years I was a certified trainer to do the Siemens LMV stuff as well, and now I mostly do only Autoflame, but I still have all my books on Siemens, and I've done a few Siemens startups of late as well, so I can still do it. I can still manage to get that pulled together. But I enjoy the uh, technological abilities that parallel positioning with electrical servos, etc., has, and how fine you can dial in the burner combustion control system, and how well you can tune the PID, and how easily you can make it communicate with a building management system. As in the old days, building management system meant that I was putting all kinds of pressure switches and pressure controllers and temperature sensors somewhere, going to our big panel full of relays, and those relays had to send a signal to a BMS somewhere of some sort. So, um, yeah, today's electronic equipment, and I think, a rare breed because of my age, still being involved in electronics like this. You know, the young fella I helped on the weekend down in the States, I think he's in the Kentucky area somewhere this weekend. It's all Autoflame equipment. One of the job I did in Bermuda a couple weeks ago, that was all Autoflame equipment. Because I've tried to become a specialist in it, and I've enjoyed doing that. I know many, many, many of the people at Autoflame, right from the owners, the original founding father of it, down to the current sons and daughters who are involved. I know them all personally. You know, we've sat down at a table to dinner for dinner, etc. When I've been at their training sessions and that, and we still, if I really have a conversation that's needed, I can call them on the phone and talk to them and say, hey, I got one of your pieces of equipment and I'm having this or that concern. How do we go about fixing that? And they've appreciated my input over the years, and I've appreciated their cooperative spirit and workability. So I've enjoyed working with the product, and I think that it does a lot of good for a lot of clients. So
How does somebody start learning or get good at Autoflame? I know they have classes at their tech centers that are 1 to 2 days, but is really. I mean, I guess this would be with any parallel positioning system. Is it really just take time of commissioning a burner or troubleshooting a burner and spending hours and hours and hours in front of a burner in order to learn it? Or is there another way that you would suggest learning?
well, Autoflame has a great couple of day training course, and I teach the same course. I have my own portable Autoflame systems with servo motors and everything. A little bit like your board behind you there on the wall. But then instead of for mod motors and linkage, I have it for Autoflame systems. So I have a couple of them, and I physically have them, and I have pieces that I hand out and show around to the classroom and everything. And we talk about the functionality of it, both academically and then physically. They get to program a combustion curve, and I lay out a curve that they have to do that looks like a sawtooth saw, intentionally tough, because it teaches them how to go through an entire commissioning process. And then they take those skill sets and they go into the field. Now, are they going to be able to program a live fired burner right away the first time without some supervision? Probably not. But they're going to know enough about it that they're going to be able to get that thing running at least at a decent flame quality, and they're going to be able to, with phone call questions to a guy like myself or one of the tech support people at tech centers or at Autoflame, they'll be able to get the final bits of it tuned in. And absolutely, by working on it day in and day out, they will become more and more versed in it. Just the same as in the old days, you and I would have to do with linkage. You know, what's driven and what's driver. Kids today don't. You say that to them. Well, are you working on a driven linkage or a driver linkage? And they would look at you and say, "What are you talking about?" Right? Well, it's a gear. Linkages are gearboxes, so it's power in, it's power out. So which one are you doing? Power in or power out, right? And you learn that by working on it. This is the same with parallel positioning, and it doesn't matter whether it's FireEye or it's Siemens or it's Autoflame. If you have the fortune to be able to do physical work with it day in and day out, you will become way more versed with it and more good at it because of the fact that it's fresh in your memory day after day. If I go to an old Mark 5 or Mark 4 somewhere that is way different than the current models, I have to stand there in front of the thing for a little while and look at it and scratch my brain and then get my fingers on the screen. After a few moments, muscle memory does kick back in. And I say, yeah, now I remember from 25 years ago how that worked. And it's the same with you and me. If we drive a car today, we're good at it. We don't drive for 6 months and then because we had a broken leg and then we get back behind the wheel. Well, we don't drive as well as we used to because we haven't done it for a while. That's the same in the burner business. And, guys, unfortunately, they try to be masters of all the burners that are out there. And I'm not so sure that that's a good thing. I think it's better off that companies say, I have this guy who's my parallel positioning guy. I have that guy who's my oil guy. I have that guy who's my electrical specialist. Because I think as a team, you might do better than one guy having to know everything and remember it all. Hey, will he get it done? Yes. If he's a good guy, he'll always get it done anyway. But what is the most efficient? It's a guy who specializes in that. And that's why if you look at the automotive industry, and I compare a lot of what we do to automotive, that's why they have transmission shops and they have muffler shops and they have guys who specialize in foreign cars and guys who specialize in domestic cars because they all have a little bit quirky things in them and you can't remember everything about every car, right? So you can't remember everything about every burner or every parallel positioning package. But are the concepts the same? The concepts are completely the same from one to the other, but they all want to make theirs special, so they name it a different name or they package it in a different way, and you have to know their procedures to be able to do it. And if you do, you're good at it. If you're not good at it, you got to play with it longer to get good at it. I think it's a matter of having the blessing of being able to spend time on it,
So how long does it take to make what you would define as a good boiler service technician, a good burner person who that you would say that person has well-rounded knowledge? How long do you think that takes?
If it's the right person, I'm going to say that probably within 5 years, they're going to be a well-rounded technician. Okay. And I think if they have worked as 5 years through the apprenticeship style of training, and then been working 5 years as a qualified technician, so they now have a total of 10 years under their belt, they're going to be a sensational technician as long as they desire and they apply themselves. Okay, but they have to want to be able to do it too. It's again, we talked about that earlier. It's a mindset. And if they have that mindset, man, there's nothing going to stop them.
Yeah, you have to apply yourself and you have to, I've seen it where people have 30 years experience and they stop applying themselves. And it's almost as bad as having somebody that's new. They know what's correct, but they almost stop doing what's correct because they start want to take shortcuts and everything. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to do day in and day out, especially with a problem when you're by yourself and you are racking your brain trying to figure it out. Of course, nobody from tech support's picking up. It's probably the day before a holiday, and it just ends up being this, everybody's staring at you, you feel alone, and you're like, man, I have to figure this out. Like it takes a special kind of person to be able to have that kind of pressure and not just, oh, we're done and we'll just come back Monday after the holiday and we'll just resume and I'll just say I don't know how to figure it out and they can just send somebody else.
Right.
Because at a certain point in time, there is nobody else.
No,
You're the end. You have to be the one that fixes it.
that's right. And that's why, I've been in this business over 50 years and I'm still learning. I always say to myself and to people around me and to the young fellows with me, I say, a day that goes by that I don't learn something new today, that was a waste. I need to learn something new every day. And if it's not on the job, then I'm on my computer. I listen to your podcast where you interview Ray Wolfhard, and you guys talk about it. I'm a little bit like that too, where I'm almost a boiler geek. Okay, I'm always digging up stories and bits about it, about boilers here and there, and looking at pictures and looking at explosion results. And although in Canada we don't normally call them explosions, they're incidents. Okay, it's an incident. We had an incident on the job. But I look at those things and study those things and figure out what went wrong here. What can I learn from that mistake so that I don't make the same mistake someday? So, yeah, it's keep learning, keep learning. And I love learning. It's fun to learn something new.
Do you think at the current rate, which is way behind, the current rate of training new people, bringing new people on, and the gap that's already here of between very knowledgeable, seasoned people like you and the next generation, I want to say, do you think we're going to regress in lessons learned or like guardrails of the industry, or like forget some hard lessons, just due to like there? I mean, there's tons of studies and labor things out there that in the next, by 2033, people like you will be retired. And there's this gap where you can relay hard lessons and knowledge to younger people. But if there's nobody like you around, those hard lessons and knowledge are no longer relayed. And then we start making the same mistakes.
No, absolutely. You are correct. That will happen if we don't have the opportunity to pass on. It's one of the things that I emphasize when I'm on the job, like last week when I was on the job with the Peabody burners and the young fellow that was there with me. I worked all day long like I was mentoring him. I said to him, I'm going to, and he was keen to hear it. I said, I'm going to tell you what I'm looking at, why I'm looking at it, and what I'm doing every step all the way around the boiler. When I'm commissioning, after every adjustment, I do one walk right around the whole boiler. And I smell the boiler, I listen to the boiler, and I look at the boiler vibration or for heat spots or whatever. I said to him, this is what you need to do. If you're going to work with me, you're going to walk around the boiler after every adjustment so that together we get to know what this boiler smells and looks like normally. Because then when it's not normal, we'll pick it up in a heartbeat. And I everything I look at, I would tell him, I'm looking at that switch, I'm looking at that gauge, I'm looking at this temperature, and I'm looking at it for this reason. And we need to do that. And young fellows have to be willing to accept that being shown to them and mentored to them by senior technicians. And if we can do that, it's great. Unfortunately, there is looking to be a bigger gap every year that goes by because less young fellows are keen on becoming technically involved. They want to do everything on the keyboard of their computer. And if they go into Autoflame, they're going to do a lot of keyboard work because a lot of it is touchscreen work and with your fingertips, no problem. You can tune a boiler up if it has Autoflame on it, wearing your wedding suit and a tie. Okay, no issues whatsoever. You can do it. But to get to that point of ready to start up and commission, there's going to be some blood, sweat, and tears and a few cracked knuckles. And the young fellows don't want to do that anymore, I find. Because I think society as a whole has failed them. Society as a whole said the only job that's any good to you is a electronics job, a computer programming job, an office job. And yet I got proof positive that this is a good job and it's a good paying job if you know what you're doing. And I hope young guys will learn that.
So how do we advertise burner industry, boiler industry? how do we advertise it in a positive light that people want to sign up for a lot of hard days and a lot of mental problems when there are, and I see this all the time, the blue collar, the trade's such a good trade, you can get paid $100,000 and all this stuff. But it's like when you're starting out, there's a lot of better options. Yeah, they may not have the best options 10 years down the line, but there are a lot of better options that are equal or better with half as hard days. And, if you have to drive to a job for an hour in your personal car and you have to work an 8-hour day, 10-hour day, drive back, and like there's no way around it. There's going to be very, very hard days, no matter how great technology is. How do we advertise as an industry to young people and attract them without lying to them? I see a lot of companies are lying or intentionally misleading people of saying like they're just leaving all the bad out. They just say all the good, everybody leaves out all the bad, but everybody's going to find out eventually. And also on the flip side, every job has bad. The people working in AI jobs and all the hot jobs, all the Google jobs, FANG and everything, there's lots of bad there, but nobody says that. They just say all the good. So how do we advertise to the younger people or anybody? If you're 40 years old and want a career change, you've still plenty of time to learn boilers and burners. So how do we advertise to anybody about the opportunities and also explain to them all the good opportunities and also the hard of what it actually means to work in a boiler room, mechanical room, or to solve hard problems?
Well, that's one of the reasons I agreed to chat with you on the podcast, was because I think it's an opportunity to explain, in a conversational style to young folks that this is a great trade and a great industry, and it can be a great lifestyle for young fellas to get into, or middle-aged guys to get into even, for sure. And that's why I try to always put on a positive smile and approach to it, and have an enjoyable demeanor while I'm talking about boilers and burners, because it is something that's passionate for me and to me, and I want young people to learn that. So podcasts would be one way so that they can just sit down and listen with earbuds in off their phone, and they can listen to the story that you and I just described, and know that, yeah, this is a job that has some unique and interesting challenges. It has some opportunity for trades. It has some opportunity to travel, etc. Was it always easy? Heavens no. There were days I worked 24 hours a day. There was one project I recall that I worked from Sunday night at 10 o'clock until the following Sunday night at 10 o'clock on the job site. Yeah, I slept here and there in my truck for a couple hours at a time, but we had a major boiler catastrophe and we had to get rental boilers up and running, and I was there to project manage it the whole time. Certainly those jobs come along that are horrendous, but they come along in every career choice too. And the boiler business is not any different that way. There's going to be tough days, absolutely. But there are going to be so many rewarding days. When you have a problem job that 4, 5, 6 guys came in before you and they couldn't fix it and they threw their tools on the floor and walked away, and then you come in and you get it up and running. Okay, the satisfaction that you feel in that job, the job satisfaction, the pride that you can take in that is beyond anything. I sometimes say to my wife, that's even better than sex. Okay, but the fact of it is that it's a reward when you get something going that nobody else could get going, and I have that. I take my trucks and my cars to a particular job shop here in town, and they do all my repair work on the cars and trucks. I just physically can't crawl under a truck anymore to do oil changes, etc. But I take it to them, and when there's a unique problem, I tell them, I expect you to fix it, and I'm going to leave it with you until it's fixed 100%, because if I have to take it anywhere else, I'm never coming back to your shop. And they get it done. They get it fixed, right? So we as technicians have the opportunity to be that last stopgap and say to somebody, you got a problem? Tell me about your problem. Okay. You want to almost be like, you're like a boiler counselor. Okay. And you listen to their problem. And I learned that when I worked in the factory, 50 years ago, um, that the best thing you can do is to, if a guy calls you and says, my machine is not working, you sit down with him and say, hey, what did it sound like when it worked correctly? What sounds did you have? What smells did you have? What did you see? Explain that to me first, because I've never worked on your machine, so I need to know what you expect. And you do the same in the boiler business. And you would be amazed that the operators, 9 times out of 10, can almost direct you to what is wrong because they know the boiler so well. They can't physically pinpoint the piece, but they can tell you the circumstances in which it's going awry. And if you can know the system well enough to understand it, you can fix it and you can be the hero. And everybody loves to be a hero. We all love a hero. That's why Superman and the rest of them all sell millions of dollars worth of comics a year, because we all love heroes. So why not be one? Here's an opportunity to become a hero.
Become a hero with real purpose that I think a lot of industries, especially office jobs, a lot of people sit in an office in cube farms, which are just, I mean, you may have 20,000 square foot floor in your office building and it's just cubicles. And you stand up, I mean, it's like all the movies. You stand up and it's just people hunched over, typing on keyboards, inputting numbers on spreadsheets. And you do that for 10 years. It doesn't even take 10 years. But they're like, what? Like, if I didn't come into work tomorrow, would anything change? Like, what is my purpose here? And what am I actually doing to make the world go round? Where boilers, you can, like, if a boiler is down, the product isn't coming out the other side of the warehouse. And if you get the product going, or if you get the boiler going, the products and the widgets start coming out. And the feedback loop is very, very quick. And it can be, as you said, very, very rewarding. And there's all kinds of other like uses like healthcare, sterilization for steam and heat, especially in Canada. And like if hospitals didn't have boilers, like you'll know if the OR lab is down because they don't have the correct humidity because the boilers are not working, you will know. All the hospital administrators will know, and they will have pallets of cash throwing at anybody because rescheduling surgeries is the worst thing a hospital can do, especially, hey, we're going to have your double knee replacement surgery. It's going to be in 6 months. All right. And then the day comes, oh, we have humidity issues. We have to reschedule. It'll be another 6 months. They don't want to do that. They want to get their cash. And that comes with caring. Like, what about that 55-year-old person that was going to have double knee surgery, but the boilers went down because you didn't care enough to fix it correctly the first time? What is their life like? So, yeah, it's the caring and having the ability and being the hero in very, very small situations. A lot of, you won't make the news typically, is if you make the news in the boiler world, you probably did a bad thing. You probably had an incident.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, that's huge. You gotta, as we said, you gotta care, gotta have some kind of interest. And yeah, I think, is there anything else you wanted to cover or say?
Man, I think we've covered an awful lot already, Eric, and it's been fun chatting with you. I appreciated the opportunity, actually. And, maybe down the road we can do it again with some other topic related to boilers, but maybe on a particular application or something. That would be fun. I appreciate the opportunity that we've had, but
how do people find you?
Well, through LinkedIn, they can direct message me through LinkedIn. That's not an issue. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, and that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. They can also send me an email, just royautoflame@gmail.com. And
can you
send me an email.
Can you spell out? I advocate for LinkedIn all the time. I want all the people to find you. Can you spell out your name for the audience so that they can find you on LinkedIn, follow you, and see all your
it's
wisdom?
Roy, ROY. And it's Voorberg, VOORBERG. And I'm with Morriston Mechanical on the LinkedIn site, and they could find me there, and they can DM me right through LinkedIn, and I'll respond pretty quick. You yourself know how quickly I usually respond when you send me a note on direct message. So
I always appreciate your posts and your knowledge. I mean, that goes for all people on LinkedIn. A lot of people, you know, the people that are just posting the AI slop and to post, but there are a lot of great people in the boiler burner industry who care, who post experiences and want to help. And if you are working for a company where you don't have somebody senior to help you, don't feel like you're alone. There are other people willing to help that, as Roy has said earlier, he's helped people. I mean, I help people that I've never met in person, all because, one, I care about helping people, but two, like, it just, I mean, that's being a good neighbor, but your neighbor doesn't have to be the person living next to you. So
exactly.
yeah, I think using social media, using LinkedIn like that for something positive, and that's why I always advocate, get yourself out there, learn from other people's experiences. You'll be 10 times better than only learn from your own experiences. So
absolutely, Eric. Thanks ever so much for having me on.